You know how earlier we are talking about these 100,000 head feeders? Well, it's a similar problem at the plants. They've gotten so large and they've created these externalized costs that everybody else in the area and community are paying whether they know it or not. They're having to, you know, operate in this, you know, economic system where scale means cheaper.
Right.
And they have taken that to the extreme. And that's not necessarily, you know, what we're saying. We know we're going to have to get to a certain level of scale just to manage our costs. Any good entrepreneur knows that.
Yep.
But at what cost are you willing to sell out your people, your community, and externalize the cost to your consumers at a rate of staggering proportions? So I can't get into like too crazy of a specific about it, but it
Yeah,
was gut
yeah.
wrenching for
It,
even I mean, think of me. I've lived on a farm and operated a farm my entire life. And it turned my stomach in ways that no one should have to be experienced to live through that, work in that, or, subject the animals to that.
hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in this world. Where I am, it's a rainy, floody kind of day here in Oklahoma at the Ultra Botanica Studios. This is Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bellieu. Ever since I met a couple of brothers from Kentucky over the phone a couple of years ago, I got fascinated with some things they're doing. I always love meeting people that have generational backgrounds and things, everything from wild crafting herbs to growing hemp to making moonshine and healthy food. And one of them just happened to join me today from a group that we'll call Mount Folly. You can look up mountfolly.com, and anywhere you want to find these guys on social media at Mount Folly. That's MT Folly. I've got Ben Pasley that I'm interviewing today, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but we're going to get into something that's really hot right now. Some of you are probably having big advertisements for movies called Kiss the Ground and Common Ground that have won all kinds of awards that are streaming right now. Two of my very favorite movies of all time that really enlightened me to the whole idea of regenerative ranching and farming. Hey, Ben Pasley, what's going on out there in Kentucky today, brother?
Josh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Anytime we get to talk about regenerative agriculture, maybe where the USDA is headed, and, all the opportunities that are in this space to not only grow better food, but take better care of our soil as a nation, as a people, as a community. I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay, run down real quick. I mean, when I first met you guys, I told you I romance about people who have a rich history of growing up in the mountains and the hill country and stuff. Give us a quick snapshot of your relatives and what brings you up to today and what makes you guys so passionate about what you're doing.
Absolutely. So, like you said, Ben Pasley, I'm from central Kentucky in the rolling hills. I'm actually an eighth generation Kentuckian, and
Incredible.
I'm a fifth generation farmer in my county. So that means that, my great grandfather first came here at the turn of the, 1900s. And the story of that we tell everybody, his name was John William Pasley, and he came to Clark County when he had seven boys, two girls. He showed up and bought 30 acres, had a milk cow, a little patch of tobacco, and a garden, and $30. That's all he showed up with.
Wow.
He came out of the mountains into the rolling hills, and this is where he decided to stop. And when those boys, when the last one finally died, it was around the 60s, which, a couple of them served in World War II,
Right.
and they all came back alive, fortunately.
Nice.
But by the time the last one died, they had several thousand acres under management,
Whoa.
several hundred head of cattle under management, several hundred acres of tobacco, which that we're in tobacco country, here in the Carolinas. But they had a family legacy that they started then, hundreds of years ago. And, so I was raised, into this farming family. But what really set us off into our current businesses with Mount Folly was I connected with Laura Freeman. Formerly, she founded Laura's Lean Beef in '85,
Right.
sold it in 2008. We've created these, and this is going to be a special part of why and what we're exactly doing, but got us into value added farm products because Laura learned in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that it's one thing if you're trying to, impact your own personal farm. It's another thing if you're trying to impact a farming system within within multiple farming communities. So we're trying to have a bigger perspective than just our personal farm or farms, I should say, because we're trying to make impact at scale and not at a national scale, but within our region, because these regional systems and regionalizing supply chains, whether it's COVID or tariffs or whichever thing you want to point at, having strong community and regional systems is one of the, aspects of our brand that we want to, be able to talk about and, make stronger.
Yeah, now the complexity as I began to look into what it is that you guys are strategizing to do out there in your community and with these mid-sized farms, 1,000 to 1,500 acre farms, it got me really excited. But I thought, man, these people are playing a chess game of trying to mobilize and help farmers kind of shift their mindset from what they may have been doing to what is happening now that's actually going to give you guys more bang for your buck, really open up supply chain opportunities so that you guys can get really lean and mean and efficient in what you're doing. Now, I understand that, and obviously, your background kind of inspires what you're doing today, but you're taking it to a whole new level. Now, in one of our conversations, you mentioned to me early on that you guys had applied for a grant, and I'm going to come back to this USDA thing in a little bit as well, but you guys had applied for some kind of grant that we're calling a climate smart commodities grant. And I think there's some pivoting that's actually having to take place right now, but tell me a little bit about that grant and what you guys envision being able to do as you roll out in phases and what you're doing there.
Sure. So we were awarded a what the Biden administration called a climate smart commodities grant. And that essentially is connecting producers with, the middlemen like ourselves that are sourcing commodities, turning them into a value added product, and then consumers. So we were already on both sides of this. And, the other thing I like to point out to people is, we're in central Kentucky. We're in the heart of, I think Mitch McConnell's slogan was God, guns, and coal. And
Hmm.
so being able to talk about the climate and the impacts of the climate were never really easy for us. In the same manner as it is to talk about, regionalizing supply
Boy,
chain.
no kidding.
So we weren't really heavy using the climate terminology, but we were able to accomplish the goals of that grant itself, which at its most simplistic definition is we have been paying farmers to implement NRCS practices. That can be prescribed grazing, planting cover crops, planting trees, all the things that can create for a good ecosystem and you know, the step in the right direction of regenerative agriculture. Learned in the last, on April 14th, we learned that President Trump and his USDA are going to be canceling that program, but at the same time have said that all these former projects, as long as they've paid at least one farmer in the last 2 years, which we paid several, so we're fine.
Nice.
We are going to be able to apply for a new project, which is going to be called Advancing Markets for Producers. It's not going to be so heavy on the climate language, But the priority of this program is going to be twofold. It's going to be how easily can we get payments to farmers, and are you going to be able to create products that will pull these commodities at a value to the farmer all the way through the supply chain. And we're proud to be able to say that we're already doing that. And if we're going to be able to provide some extra NRCS funding to our farmer network in the greater Ohio River Valley, so I'm talking everything from Ohio down even to the Carolinas, even,
Wow.
even northern Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, this entire part of the country that we can sign people up for and implement some, rather simple practices. And some of these farmers might already be administering some of these practices, but because we're already in our proof of concept and we're selling wholesale, retail, anywhere that we can, move some of our beef, we're already there. And
Yes.
so,
So you guys have a proven supply chain. You know, one of the struggles I've seen as I've looked at some of these documentary movies that are so powerful is that the shifting of the mindset from someone that's just been doing the basic agri-farming over the last several decades in their family to then moving into these regenerative practices. But it sounds like you guys have personally implemented these yourselves within your own culture there, and you've already got other people at various phases of doing some of these things that would move a farm from what we've seen as the conventional utilized pesticides, you know, and it just looks like a strip farming thing, to what I've looked at as these amazing ecosystems that are lush and look natural and stuff. Can you describe just briefly a little bit about coming into one of those areas and how quickly you can implement these practices? Because I know back in the day, the whole idea was, well, we can't embrace these without losing our shirt. Me being a traditional farmer, but you guys are turning these things around really quickly these days by implementing some of these strategies. Give us a little snapshot of how that works and how quickly someone can do it. Because at the end of the day, for me, I'm a business guy, I'm an entrepreneur, you guys are entrepreneurs. It's all about how quickly can I begin to feed my family and even multiply revenue back to me. And it sounds like you're accomplishing that.
yes, well, you hit it right on the head. At the end of the day, the first thought needs to be financial. You can't, unless you are just independently wealthy, you don't need to go out and borrow, 180% of your worth to go implement some practice. That doesn't work. We have to have almost like the three-legged stool of decision making between the financial aspect, from the family community aspect, all the way down to what are the results of that. So I'm sure you have listeners from all over North America, and different farmers are going to have different, I mean, uh, not only different soil types, but different levels of risk to different equipment that will, a certain practice might make more sense for him to start with and then add on more later. So for us, you know, we're trying to take it in a step of a direction in our part of the country, I'll say, is lifetime pasture access. That is the first thing that we can say for our supply chain. Our animals have lifetime pasture access forever. And when a farmer starts that way, the easiest thing to do is to buy some different species of grasses to create a more diverse ecosystem in their pasture. All right. Then, say if they had row crops that they fed some of that corn back to their cattle, then it'd say, all right, well, first thing we can do is let's do some cover crops. So even if you do till or no till, we can at least start with cover crops, because that cover crop can, keep the soil engaged, not, having minimal erosion, and can, be good fuel for the microbiome of the soil when it is terminated in some way, shape, or form. Now, from there, it can get more complicated by, going fully organic, for example. Like you said, no chemical, no synthetic fertilizers. It can also get more complicated in saying, all right, we're grazing in our pastures. Now we're going to do prescribed grazing where we move these animals every 3 to 5 days. And that's when you can start to have more cattle per
Right,
acre. So
right.
that then if the farmer can have more cattle per acre, all of a sudden his revenue went up because his inventory just increased. You see what I'm saying? It's it creates a system that is ecologically viable and diverse enough that it can sustain as many mouths, if you will, mouths on the farm and off the farm.
Yeah, and when I heard some of these numbers from people that just had 1,000 or 2,000 acres and they began to rotate the animals from pasture to pasture like you're talking about, laying in some cover crops and stuff, I was astonished because I thought this is like the difference between this family just kind of getting by and having to exist on government subsidies and being able to ultimately become independent and actually make as much as 40% more per acre, which ends up being able to create a legacy. I mean, it's like, why would the kids not want to leave if they're walking into some kind of profitable, sustainable thing where they can send their kids off to college. They can have money to do things. I mean, I was really astonished that the older way is actually the more profitable way. Has it helped you guys? I mean, you guys have been around in that area for a long time. I suspect being the leader of the charge can have people on both sides of the fence. You've got opposition and people wanting to join you. How hard has it been for you guys to raise your hand in the community and say, "Hey, look, we've put together a plan. We actually have a way to do this. We've proven it ourselves. Now, y'all come and let's do this thing together." Has that been a big challenge, or has it been not too difficult for you?
Not as difficult as I originally thought it was going to be. 2 years ago, when the beef aspect of our companies really started to take off when we got the Climate Smart grant, I thought that it was going to be almost impossible to find enough of the what's called, backgrounded cattle, 7, 8, 9 weights, because a finished animal gets up to 13, 14, 1,500 pounds. And I just didn't think that there were enough of those animals out there, let alone find a farmer, willing to even do something different. But we've absolutely found some great willing partners. I've also seen that it's kind of this new transitional period of like the leaders on farms, you know, the younger generation, and in farmer terms, younger is like, men and women in their 40s.
Wow.
But the 40-year-old farmers that have been farming with their families for the last, say 10, 20 years, that you're starting to see this transition go on where now the key decision holder is kind of this next generation, and they are willing to make decisions or maybe try something new or just think outside the box of the idea with regenerative farming, with the idea of how can we take the best care of our land, because this is what is able to kind of like, this is the starting point of our viability. 'Cause if we take care of the land, it'll take care of us. And, every farm's a little different, but, we've seen issues with soil erosion. We've seen issues with, NPK uptake with some of the row crop farmers that, oh, we buy, anhydrous and put ammonium nitrate on it, and we have this unbelievable, you know, expense for our fertilizer. Well, what are other options out there? Is there a composting option? Is there a compost tea option? What kind of nitrogen rich cover crops can we add into the rotation where we may not be able to eliminate the fertilizer, but we're buying less of it? You see what I'm saying? So being able to think about it in that type of constructive way with the newer generation has been, we're kind of fortunate in our timing in a lot of this stuff.
Well, that's so cool. I'm reminded I had a friend who passed away a number of years back, but we were super close. And he had gotten into mining deposits of humate and rich with fulvic acid and stuff out in Colorado. And his father-in-law happened to be like a generational rancher that, at any given time had cattle grazing on, 25 to 40,000 acres. And they devised a little experiment where they segregated some of these cattle and began to implement the humic and fulvic and the water feed systems for these cattle, and in some of their feeding as well. And the differences that they were getting in finished weight and the health of these animals and what they were bringing at market was staggering to me. And it really took this old timer and convinced him, in short order that this is a really profitable way to farm. And it's going to be one that's going to allow me to leave a legacy of better land to all of those coming up after me. And it sounds like you guys have demonstrated that very same thing out there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a constant struggle. I mean, we're working on it to constantly be able to improve it. Um, but we are at least fortunate that the timing, it's so strange how the timing of having a pastured product that we're essentially, like when we talk about that, we're going to be bringing part of the supply chain back from the Midwest. A lot of people don't realize that in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, that's where a majority of our extremely large meat uh, feeders are,
Yep.
trucking cattle out
Yep.
that are everything from 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 pounds, feeding them on feed for 150, 180 days, and then they go to a packing plant somewhere out there. And these feeding operations are, have a lot of externalized costs that are not always direct. Like, we're talking about 100,000 animals on one 5 acre tract or 10 acre
Wow.
tract that all the rain runoff from their manure, all
Yep.
of the phosphates that are coming off in their urine, all of the problems when you centralize something to that magnitude. And what we're trying to do with our program, say if there's a farmer that's interested in trying something new, that we get backgrounded 7, 8, 9 weights, 800 pounds, say, that go to that farmer's pasture system and go from 800 pounds to 130 or 1,300 pounds, then we can take them to our processing facility here in Central Kentucky and turn them into a value added product that that hasn't happened the last 30 years. All we've seen is, farmers want to take their animals to the stockyards and then they get trucked out west. Well, that's
Right.
2,000 miles away. Those are more food miles. When they truck the animal out, they truck the finished beef back. So if we could eliminate 2,000 food miles for every serving or calorie in the protein space of beef, like that's a win-win as far as we're concerned. And
Yeah.
specific, we're kind of getting close to touching on the topic of, is it better for you?
Yeah,
Because
well, we are, because I was about to say to you, I'm looking at my producer Thomas right now through the glass here at Ultra Studios. I'm Josh Bellieu hanging out with Ben Pasley of Mount Folly. Down the hall, I've got a buddy named Kyle. He's got a roomie that he works with, right next to him. I would say out of 30 people on our staff, including our CEO, Adam Payne, who's out hanging out with some naturopaths today out in Arizona, we all buy we all buy grass fed and grass finished, and don't mind paying more. We've noticed the difference in eating that meat, the health that it gives us, the vitality it gives us in our everyday life. It seems to me, in some ways, the pandemic prepared us for paying higher prices at the grocery shelf, but now I'm actually buying grass-fed meats that are not that much more expensive than the other meats, and happy to do it. What is that? Is that kind of? Is it really beginning to shift all over the country?
so I wouldn't say that there's a couple different designations I want to point out here. So You have the commodity beef that's, trucked out to the Midwest that is on almost 100% corn diet. Then you have the grass fed and grass lifetime fed. That is all that they ever eat. And really, the only way to really put some weight on those cattle at the very end is they have to be eating a high calorie, almost like an ration. And
Wow.
it's almost impossible to do like in the winter or like in some of your more arid states like New Mexico, Wyoming. I don't, or, in that area of the country, I don't know how in the world you could finish grass fed. Now there are some guys in Montana that are doing it amazing, but that's some of the best grasslands in the world you
Right.
can find up in Montana, and Idaho in that general area, part of the Dakotas too. But what we're doing, given on our area, what works good for us and what our customers really seem to like, we are doing lifetime pasture access with some grain. We're able to feed, they have that constant option of those diverse pastures that they can always be eating on grass, but we're able to supplement with grain. So we're doing uh, grain on grass, is how we're calling it. And well, the big designation is lifetime pasture access.
Gotcha.
So
And ultimately, is the goal to be able to phase out the grain in favor of everything just being 100% in the regenerative or climate smart agriculture zone, as you discussed earlier?
so we're taking a different approach to the corn aspect itself. A lot of folks, excuse me, a lot of folks when they hear, monoculture corn with synthetic fertilizers, they think that can't be regenerative at all. But our approach is almost a poly farm approach where the corn is grown on the same farm. It is,
Nice.
if it's not non-GMO, it's certified organic. And if it
Nice.
is non-GMO, it's no-till and it has cover crops behind it to
Perfect.
where this one poly farm is able to supplement not only that animal on its pasture, but its feed source with its grain. It's drinking water from the same streams because the streams are clean and good and, are able to supplement its entire diet. And that's been our approach to start. Now, I'm not
Well,
gonna say
well,
that
that's
that's going
brilliant because you've created an ecosystem right there
ab-
within a 1,000 to 1,500 acre farm. That's
abs-
brilliant.
absolutely because one the the devil's advocates of grass-fed beef would say, which in the aspect of the anti-climate aspect of beef, because you have to remember in the 2000s, 2010s, a lot of the pro-climate consumers did not buy beef, and they switched to vegan burgers and soy
Right.
burgers and those things
Yuck.
because the the data then said, oh, cattle belch and pass methane at a substantial rate. So the devil's advocate on grass-fed beef would say uh, the lifetime for these grass-fed animals to get up to a butcher weight or 1,300 pounds can be 34, even sometimes 36 months. So that animal has a very long life that it is eating and belching and, having the negative aspects of these animals.
Right.
So in our model, we are gaining just as much, if not faster, than what the commodity beefs are, where we're able to raise an animal for 24 to 26 months of its life. It's weighing 1350, is yielding out so that it makes, sense for us as the processor, as far as like pounds of meat per animal.
Wow.
It doesn't have that extra year of its life where you're having to stretch out your income waiting for that animal to be fully finished. Now, I'm sorry. Do you have a thought there?
Well, I was just going to say, in what you're talking about there, being able to shave these times down to get these animals to a certain size and then maintaining the way they're eating and being in control of that the entire time, being able to ensure non-GMO, being able to ensure that the actual grain that you are feeding them is coming from the ground and is organic. it's astonishing to me. One of the things that occurs to me, though, and I know you guys have been such forward thinkers in regard to this grant program, you guys are in the you guys are in the business of discipling people. I ran across some names as I was investigating you guys, Dylan Kennedy, Alice Melendez, who are actually doing training, mentorship, community engagement, and education to help you guys bring all these other farmers on board and even to domino these ideas out into other states. Um, how's that been working for you guys? And is that a real uphill challenge, or have you been able to kind of snap in some of these ideas you have in engaging other community members to get on board with you?
Yeah, they've been the boots on the ground to recruit some of the farmers, most of the farmers in the program. And when you when you're in this regenerative agriculture space, the biggest problem is how do you certify the farms themselves? And what Dylan and Alice are going to be, focusing on here in the near future is that one of these third-party entities is called the Savory Institute. Alan Savory, originally from South Africa, is a brilliant mind in the space of holistic management and regenerative agriculture.
Nice.
So what Dylan and Alice have been doing is they have created a certified, they call them hubs, but it's a nonprofit entity. But this savory hub that's in our bioregion in the greater Ohio River Valley is called Field Speak. And if you dig deep enough in mountfolly.com, you'll be able to find that. But this third party accredited savory hub that is ran by Alice and Dylan are going to be able to provide that third party, boots on the ground application of, are you certified regenerative? Do you want to be? How can you be? What's the most physically, you know, balanced way that you can approach the problem? And so, Alice and Dylan, that's their current thing that they're going to be working on. Having a third party certifier that's not in house of us so that they can be,
Right.
non biased.
Yep.
And then one thing that Alice does, she's gonna love this shirt, but this is our shirt from the Heritage Food Festival that she's had every year, and it's about as you mentioned earlier, the old ways of getting back to how things are done, where we have, on-farm chicken processing and how to process your own chicken, how to render your own lard that Dylan does, how to make your own biochar charcoal so that you can have a soil amendment. If you all ever heard about biochar, people love biochar. It's a charcoal essentially that you can use as a soil amendment that creates essentially a home for these microbiologicals in our soil. It's one of
Nice.
the best applications you can add to your farm, your garden, to create a healthy soil. And that's one of the things at the Heritage Food Festival that we have, like, trainings and examples that Dylan and Alice both lead. And I mean, they'll even have a seed swap. They'll have a variety, but it's about doing things the old way. And that's an idea of what Alice and Dylan have been doing and are going to continue to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Heritage Food Festival thing and what you just mentioned because the biochar thing is all about creating an environment that allows those microbes that have been missing from the, the last multiple decades of farming done the way it's been done currently and moving it back to the old ways. You're saying that the biochar basically creates this astonishing environment for the microbes, the enzymes that we actually want in the soil that make a difference in the quality of the food that we're eating. It really kind of puts that on steroids, doesn't it?
It really does. And we've done some small tests on the farm ourselves. Dylan's even made some 50-gallon kind of like test kilns, if you will, and shows you how to make those too at the festival. But
Nice.
we've also found a provider of biochar at scale out of the Carolinas where we've trucked in, I mean, truckloads, literal truckloads of biochar, and then
Way
spread
cool.
them like with a manure spreader, and then let them work their way into the ground.
Now, I want people to fasten their seatbelts for this next part because I got just a taste of this from, pun intended, from talking to your brother Zach, and I wanted to bring the question up. It wasn't on our original list of questions, but I know it's not going to shock you, but you guys did a little bit of a USDA tour, and I don't want to bash another letter agency, but you guys actually were checking out processing plants. I think you may have gone as far out as Colorado and stuff. Um, Tell me just to pull the covers back a little bit on some of the horror stories you learned, because I remember Zach basically saying, we're going to have to be building our own processing plants after what we saw. Tell our viewing public what you saw, because I'm hoping under the current administration, along with all the other house cleaning they're doing that I know's put a little bit of a burden on you guys, I hope they're going to go clean up these USDA plants. Tell us what you saw when you went out there and inspected some of these things.
Well, I mean, it's hard for to put into perspective to the general public because I would say that, I mean, less than a quarter of a percent of the population has ever been in one of these industrial plants.
Right.
The simplest and most maybe the easiest way to say it is that it was a factory of turning animals into consumer cuts. And when you're talking about 2,500 animals per shift, that's not even in a day. They do
Wow.
5,000 animals in a day. And, they had some scares during COVID. They had some, now, I mean, if you believe the talking heads, uh, they don't have this issue. But if you know anybody from the Latin America community, their workforce, which is predominantly from Central and Southern America, they're
Right.
scared and they're at risk of losing their workforce, in my personal opinion. But the boots on the ground effect of these industrial processors is just overwhelming. You know how earlier we are talking about these 100,000 head feeders? Well, it's a similar problem at the plants. They've gotten so large and they've created these externalized costs that everybody else in the area and community are paying whether they know it or not. You
Yep.
know, they're having to, you know, operate in this, you know, economic system where scale means cheaper,
Right.
and they have taken that to the extreme. And that's not necessarily, you know, what we're saying. We know we're going to have to get to a certain level of scale just to manage our costs. Any good entrepreneur knows that. But at what cost are you willing to sell out your people, your community, and externalize the cost to your consumers at a rate of staggering proportions? So I can't get into like too crazy of a specific about it, but it
Yeah.
was gut
Yeah.
wrenching for
It,
even I mean, think of me. I've lived on a farm and operated a farm my entire life. And it turned my stomach in ways that no one should have to be experienced to live through that, work in that, or, subject the animals to that.
Well, I know that after my brief conversation with your brother Zach, and again, he didn't try to get too specific, but it was easy for me to read between the lines. It made me feel so good about the meats that I am choosing to buy off the shelf from these family farms, that are doing it right. And so I really want to congratulate you guys for taking the deep dive into here's the current culture of what's taking place from farm to table out there. We're going to revolutionize that. We're going to change that. And at the same time, we're going to begin to heal the land, create a different micro or ecosystem within our soils to take it back to where it was decades, hundreds of years ago. And at the end of the day, we're going to be putting food on the table for our kids and our grandkids and our great grandkids that's actually going to help sustain their life, give them a better quality of life. One of the things I've found that's been astonishing to me, the healthier I eat, the less food that I eat. It's really strange how the grass-fed and the grass-finished meats, the vegetables that are grown right, the grains that are grown right and sprouted and things like that. Um, I get full a lot quicker eating those foods. So there's just got to be all kinds of nutrition, enzymes, and things that we've been missing in our food that we're now getting through these what should be called old forms of food, but we're actually calling them, new because they're new to us.
Yeah.
But
We
man, I
refer to
just want
that.
to congratulate you guys for what you're doing because you've taken on a monumental task in trying to bring these mid-sized farms along, create mentoring programs for them, create ways to disciple, and at the same time show them this is commercially viable. Now, one of the things that blew my mind, and maybe you can speak to this, when I was watching the movies, the original movie, if I remember right, it was called I think it was called Kiss the Ground, and now the most recent one, Common Ground. They were showing pictures of a guy that had basically started doing the regenerative ranching on his farm right next to one of these total strip farming operations. And you had this road running right down the middle. And what was so bizarre is this guy's land on the left of the camera that you were looking at that had only implemented these regenerative practices about 6 years before. It looked beautiful. It looked lush. It looked totally different. And he was talking about how it would actually rain on that land, and that land would sequester enormous amounts of carbon. And then the camera would pan over to the neighbors, and it's like, really? These are across the road from each other, and one looks like a desert? And one looks like the Garden of Eden. Tell me a little bit about that because it just blew my mind that you could literally attract rain to an area by doing these regenerative farming practices that then would end up sequestering much greater amounts of carbon than you ever could doing it the other way. Talk about that a little bit for those people that are really hung up on the whole eco thing out there and don't believe, that we're doing any, don't believe that the traditional agri-farming is doing anything to hurt the atmosphere and hurt this idea of carbon sequestration.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head when you're talking about even not just sequestering more carbon, but within like the savory ecological outcome verification, like what we're using, it's the look of all the cycles. It's the water cycle, the carbon cycle, there's minerals, there is, I mean, the aspect of the animals that are, even the small rodent animals that are dying and decomposing. You got good, healthy decomposition going on in the soil. The having all these systems working together in the best way possible. I mean, not just how much carbon can be sequestered, but when it rains. I mean, that's the best way to put it into perspective.
Yeah.
You have one of these ecologically diverse systems or farms or fields, and it's able to soak up as much of that water as possible. You're talking about resilience to drought, resilience, resilience to erosion, resilience to all these aspects that the commodity commercial farmer has to battle in other ways. That either they just are losing a substantial amount of topsoil every year, or they are, constantly having drought issues, or they're having, one thing after another, because regardless of how you feel about the climate argument, I mean, our climate is changing in a way of we are seeing, the pendulum swing further and further away from the middle, which means we could have, I mean, we just had 30 some days of rain. Before that, we've had droughts in the previous years.
Yep.
Right as soon as like soybeans are putting their blooms on, and we're afraid we're not going to have pod fill. And, having a diverse ecological system that can be resilient, not just how much carbon can we sequester. We know that we're sequestering enough carbon because we can see, how we have plants on the soil year round, or how deep and diverse the root structures go when we have a rye cover crop. And, it's able to change and always be growing. But being able to have one of these regenerative systems next to a commercial operation is some of the best marketing you can have on why
Yeah,
it's so great to
it
look at the
is.
bigger picture of how can we impact acres in the best way and create that legacy. You said legacy earlier. I like that word.
Yeah, well, the thing that blew my mind is the visual acuity, the optics of looking at those two totally diverse ways of doing things, and one being completely unsustainable and creating less money in the farmer's pocket at the end of the day or the rancher's pocket, and one that's literally creating a legacy within the soil, within the microbes in the soil, within the nutrients in the soil, within the actual finished product that's coming off that soil, and then the legacy of the family being able to pass on something that is going to be reproducible and producing more money. I was blown away. I mean, I've got to say it one more time. If you haven't seen those two documentaries, Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, you need to watch them because you're going to be blown away that what uh, Ben Pasley's talking about here can actually shift and change the cycles of rain within environments around the country where they're basically producing things on the ground that are influencing more rain coming into those areas. And I just think that is staggering. I know we could go on and on. So I've got a last couple of questions. Before I do, though, I want to make sure to mention a couple of times. Go to mountfolly.com to learn about what these people are doing. MTFOLLY.com. And then if you're on Instagram, if you're on X, if you're on Facebook, it's just at Mount Folly, MTFOLLY. Don't believe there's any period in any of that. So again, mountfolly.com, MTFOLLY.com. You can connect with what Ben Pasley, Zach Pasley, all these people are doing to put in place these programs that can be duplicated in other areas of the country. And believe it or not, guys, our own tax dollars are beginning to pay for some of these things. So if you've got local politicians that you want to point to something that's working, you mention these guys in the letters that you're writing to your state legislators, to those people that are representing you on the House floor and the Senate floor locally, and let them know, hey, they're doing this. It's profitable. It's working. It's working in a short period of time, and it's creating legacy opportunities that are not going to have to rely on the government in the future. So, lining up a couple of the last things, what have been the biggest challenges and lessons that you've learned as you've dove into doing this, Ben, and you and your crew out there? Tell me a little bit about that and how you've overcome those.
I would say like our biggest challenge is really from just a basic entrepreneurship aspect of the economic viability of it. Because, like you just pointed out, there are some public funds that are supporting these efforts. There are a few, really great operations that are just 100% doing it by themselves. But if we are going to have an impact of scale across the nation, there are some NRCS dollars, which is the uh, nation pool of money from the USDA that are going into these practices. This money was first spent by President Obama in 2008, 2009 for cover cropping, and they had no idea it would have this kind of great impact over the long term. We could expand the practices.
Amazing.
The hardest thing to overcome by far was it continues to be the economic viability of it, because at the end of the day, and we're unique being a grant awardee in our current situation because we're a for-profit business, right? And we're incentivized to go create a huge network of farmers and impact those dollars per farms as drastic as we can. And so that's probably, that's my overall hardest thing to overcome is the constant economic viability of it, because it's not just the farmer buying. Our cattle, as a nation, we have one of the smallest cow herds that's ever been had in the last 73 years.
Wow.
And that's because, most people would keep back their heifers for their cow herd, and then turn them into a commercial cow, and they're making babies for their 15, 18 years of life.
Right.
Heifers are bringing just as much money as steers right now. So we've seen a pattern over the last 10, 15 years that people just keep selling their heifers because they need money now. They don't need,
Wow.
12, 14 calves out of that animal over the next 15 years. They need their money now. And so that's one of the aspects of our AMP grant under President Trump that we're going to implement is a heifer retention incentive. And that's going to be one of the aspects talking about how do we overcome economic viability. Well, by having more cattle that we can source is going to mean that we can then process more animals, and we can then obviously sell to more customers that can eat a better product that's better for them.
So, will some of these people that are listening to us, and as we run into other people like you out there, can they learn kind of the buzzwords and a little bit of the strategy that you put together? Because it seems like more and more these days, since the whole COVID debacle happened, it seems to me that people on Capitol Hill, both on a local and on a federal level, are listening more to the people out there, and they're wanting to hear what the average person is saying. Can they learn some things by going to mountfolly.com if they are legacy farmers in this space? Is that the best place I can point people for them to kind of get a roadmap on the best way for them to get in touch with their local politicians and begin to move the needle? Because for me, I'm all about spending tax dollars for this kind of stuff all day long because, I have a legacy of farming in my family that we finally ultimately sold off the family farm to a legacy farmer. And, I'd like nothing more than for them to get on the bandwagon and start farming and ranching the way you guys are doing it. Is mountfolly.com a resource that we can send people to begin to learn what you guys have done?
Yes, that's a good starting point. But if
Okay.
someone is a current farmer that's not in the greater Ohio River Valley and say they want to find a project either similar to ours or just want to know what's out there, we recommend people to go talk to their local USDA office or what a lot of people call their FSA office.
Okay.
And that is a great starting point. I mean, anybody can Google around and try to find something, but the local FSA offices know exactly what programs or partnerships, in our case, are creating these market opportunities for producers. And I know that, excuse me, um, there isn't a official list yet of all the partnerships for advancing markets for producers, or AMP, AMP. That list should be coming out in hopefully the next 60 to 90 days. But there's definitely going to be these new partnerships that are going to be signing up more farmers and impacting more acres in the near future.
Well, you keep me plugged in because we want to do anything we can to push the message out there. Again, mountfolly.com. You've been listening to Ben Pasley on Ultralife Today. I'm Josh Bellieu. I can't thank you enough, Ben, for what you, your brother, and your team are doing out there to actually change our world to make a difference and give us legacy opportunities in the ranching and the farming space, but as well as me being able to feed my kids and grandkids food that's going to sustain them and make them healthier as they move through life as well. Again, mountfolly.com. And then, of course, wherever you're feeding on social media, it's at Mount Folly. That's at the at sign MT Folly. Ben, we want to get you back on sometime and get some updates from you. But gosh, it's fun talking to a Kentucky guy that's got a legacy of everything from wildcrafting herbs to growing hemp to moonshine distilleries, CBD distilleries, all the ways that you're influencing entrepreneurs out there in your area of the world. Man, keep up the great work and pass on my best to the rest of the team, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. And if I could summarize and say one thing,
Please.
we are trying to make better food with better soil. And that's our sentiment.
Gotta love it, man. Ben Folly or Ben Pasley from mountfolly.com. Thanks again, Ben.